God has led us over the years, you know, from the very beginning to what we are now. Because when I first went there, when I was 14, it was just an old chapel and we sat on hard benches. We were tied to the Chester Street Church when we had their ministers as well. I can remember going to Sunday school there. And I learnt a lot there, really. And after I'd been there a year, we had a new minister, the Reverend Ralph Drake, who baptised quite a few young people who came to be Christians in the 1950s, 1954, 55. He was a very good minister. He took a lot of interest in young people and in teaching us Bible studies. Later on, we had the Reverend Derek Thomas, who was also a very good minister. I think in the 50s and 60s, there seemed to be quite a movement of God's Spirit in the area. There were a lot of young people becoming Christians in lots of the churches, the Methodists, the Presbyterian, Calvary Holiness up in, and we all met together on a Saturday night in the fellowship, Christian fellowship. So there was a vibrant Christian witness, really. We used to have various evangelists come round, you know, to having meetings in the town. And we had a National Young Life campaign group on a Friday in the church house. We used to do coffee bar evangelism we used to go round with questionnaires and things like that. We were urged to do practical things like help in a children's home, which I did, or go and visit old people or sick people. And it was very busy, really, in the 50s and 60s, if you were a Christian. It was a very wonderful time, really. We came back to live in Wrexham, my husband and I. And by that time, Brinley, Hughes had married Glenys and had come into the church as well.
Soon after I was converted, I started going to Bradley Road in '66. Steve and Arfona were there, and they made me so welcome, and Steve really looked after me in those early days. I developed under him running the boys' club on a Friday. Those early days, they were good, you know.
But we were rather a small congregation. We were still attached to Chester Street Church. And at that time, there was a bit of a trouble with the Baptist College in Manchester, which were denying virgin birth and things like that. And we felt as a congregation that we should come away from the Baptist Union.
Bradley Road then sought autonomy from Chester Street. We went to a Christian solicitor in Heswell on the Wirral.
And it was amazing the way that it was done with not very little opposition, really. But then the church had to come down, didn't it? And I mean, all the time we were in it and everything, we didn't know that it was absolutely riddled with dry rot. And the problem was it was infecting the house, the next house along, the wall.
At that time, God's provision, there was an architect in the church, came to worship with us, and he inspected it. After Rentokil would not give any guarantee or remedial work, he said it's dangerous. So it had to be demolished. We had to compensate the man next door, demanded compensation, although we still think to this day that it was not our fault. So that left the church broke.
I think it was in the early 1970s, something like that, 70, 71. The church was brought down and the little schoolroom left on the site. Looked like Snow White's cottage. It was just a small room with an attached toilet and a very small kitchen. And we held our services there, and we had children by then as well, so it was a bit of a squash. One evening we were going to the prayer meeting. There was a meeting on or something, and I think my parents were babysitting when we were going to the meeting, and there was a young man wandering round the grounds of Bradley Road, and he said he was looking for the church. He thought there was a church there, but he couldn't find one. And he was a trainee doctor who was doing a year in the Miler, and he came to us then all the time. We didn't always worship in that little cottage because it had to come down, and so we worshipped at a corner shop in Alexandra Road, owned by some Indian family.
The shop would close. The people that lived to the house attached let us worship there.
And every Sunday morning, sitting there, especially my husband, who was born in India, there was this lovely smell of curry coming through from the back, from their quarters. But we worshipped there for quite a while.
Now, if you have a look across our car park now, you'll see the line of the old church. And Stephen and myself repointed it all. After the demolition, we used to go there on Saturday mornings. We did a lot of work in the church through the week and things, but Saturday afternoons was family time. And whatever, we left at lunchtime. We'd been pointing, bitterly cold, I remember that day, and we left at about 12 noon. And Steve crossed the road from the church, and he looked back. Now, I don't say this lightly, and he wouldn't agree with it being light. He did have a vision of a church being there and people coming in and out.
I can see it, he said, and cars. He said, I can see cars in the car park and things, because we were only a few.
Well, as I said earlier, there was an architect came in at the church. He was around. He did mainly worship at Boris. He did some drawings for us. We spent our last monies on those drawings. But we launched out in faith. We started to dig the foundations out by hand, and the concrete foundations were put in.
And the work was on the site was done a lot by the church members, young people that we had by that time. We had a young people's group who helped. Other churches helped us with different things.
So we wanted the bricks now to start building. At that time, there was an incredible waiting list for the bricks we wanted, which are Buckley Blues. There was a building strike, so the local building supplies people had a load of these bricks. We just had enough money to buy the bricks. And then my father worked for McAlpines, and McAlpines had a team of builders up at Brumbo Steelworks. A couple of their fellas, in their time off, came down and built the schoolroom. The monies came in, and I tell you what, Bradley Road is built on the widow's mite. Just enough at the time needed, all the time. So we got to roof height.
When it was nearly up, we needed a beam. I can always remember this, for this schoolroom, and couldn't quite get one the right size. And to have it made, it would have been an awful lot of money or something. And I can remember in the prayer meeting, there was a lot of prayer about this beam went for. And I don't know if it was Bryn or somebody said he was sure that the Lord would provide this beam.
McAlpines again brought us this girder from one of their quarries. It needed welding together. It was in two pieces. Welded it together and got the crane in and put it on.
You saw God at work there. You saw answered prayer, and for all the work, because it was a lot of work for the men of the church. And I can remember one of the young women who was in our youth group what she did when they were all working on the site, she would go and make them a cup of coffee and you know, it was always doing their part, really. Yeah.
We were then stuck again. No money. Where is the roof coming from? There was attending the church a lady called Mrs. Palmer. Her husband was a Welshman and he worshipped at Bryn Baptist Church, the Welsh. Anyway, both of these people passed away. And in their will was left money for Bradley Road. And it was exactly the amount to roof the building.
You know, if you trust in the Lord, you know, and lead not to you, sometimes you would lead to your own understanding. But because we went, well, we would worry about that beam, but God had it in hand, and yeah.
We built the schoolroom first because it had the toilet and the kitchen. David Wynne, Glenn is my wife's brother, and Stuart Olyott did the opening services, about 73, 74.
Stephen and I had to move after the schoolroom was... We were there for a while, but then Stephen got transferred with his work and had to go to Aberystwyth. And so it was left really then to Bryn, and it was a big shock, really.
For a time, I was running it on my own. You know, 3 services on a Sunday, and very often a prayer meeting. We would have as many visiting speakers as we could. Sunday school in the afternoon. Oh, hey, God forbid. You know, it's not by works. We're not saved by works. That's the joy of serving Christ. I would not have been able to do any of this, my part in Bradley Road. I would not have been able to do anything without my Glenn. People say, oh, you built Bradley Road. No. Glenn was involved as well. Because Glenn sacrificed my time with her and the children. I give God such thanks for exactly the right wife. If you leave it to God, he chooses the best. We gave a priority then to call in a pastor. It was filling up, the church was filling up. And Jim Harding, an ex-NYLC evangelist, he came to be our pastor. And the church just took off, if I can use that term. We're extremely active in the community in that, you know, the Sunday school was incredible. All that area, the children used to come from that area, you know. Gibson Street, Peel Street, Bellevue Road, you know, Victoria Road. You would still have anniversary, Sunday school anniversary and Christmas nativity. And this would bring the parents in. It involved the community, you know, and that's how it took off. Steve had made a good foundation with the boys' club and youth activities. Every other Sunday we would have the young people back. Had the joy of leading some to Christ, you know. I remember one girl sitting on the stairs with her there, you know, leading her to the Lord, you know. Wonderful. And they became too small. So we thought we'd go ahead and do the main sanctuary, shall we call it, you see today. We had to have new drawings made. An architect from Johnstown did those. God's provision through those at that time was incredible. There were times when it would be on a standstill because of monies. And it was opened in 95, wasn't it?
It was wonderful when I came back from Aberystwyth as well to the opening of the new church. I was just sorry that Stephen couldn't be with me to witness it, you know. I came back in 2001 that sold my big house in Aberystwyth, which was finding hard to manage after I'd been widowed for so long. Tried to buy in Aberystwyth and everything fell through. And we were still very close to Bryn and Glenys. And Glenys said, well, why don't you try in Wrexham? So I did. And everything went through fine. And so I was really glad. A bit difficult when I first came back. But it was wonderful to get in with the church. And then Andrew came as our minister. And it was really settled. And I was able to help with the ladies, with Barbara and Glenys, and the ladies, and the coffee morning as well. We had some very blessed times then. Had a very good neighbour when I was in Chestnut Avenue, and eventually he came to church through the coffee morning and became a Christian, you know. Seeing the church and seeing the church grow, especially, you know, now we have, well, for quite a while, quite a good congregation.
And that is the fulfilment of Steve's vision, you know, as you see it today with people in and out. We must all continue to pray for Nigel. Pray for Nigel. He's a lovely lad. He's a lovely lad. What is the main intention of the church today? It's the same as it's always been. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. There is rejoicing in heaven and on earth when a soul is saved. And when there's a work of the Holy Ghost, you recognize it and you can see it. And it's mighty. Genesis 18, verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord?